Hey guys, I'm Dov, and today I'm back with more Total War Warhammer 2 online action, continuing on our DLC discussion with the other half of the King and the Warlord. Today here with the Dwarves, of course. We're going to be taking on the new Lizardmen, so let's go ahead and have a look. This is, of course, a DLC-free build. We've got Ungrim Iron Fist and Runesmith, an organ gun, and a cannon, 3 units of regular Slayers, 4 Thunderers, 3 Dwarf Warriors up front, and 4 Miners with blasting charges. For my Lizardmen opponent, we've got a couple of Feral Cold Ones, Ancient Salamander, let's see here, a whole bunch of Red-Crested Skinks mixed with Saurus Warriors with shields and a few Skink cohort. Led by Saurus Old Blood, they've also got a Skink Priest, Lore of Heavens. Let's see here, yep, more Saurus, there's the Feral Bastiladon there. We've also got the Pawhawks Sentinels out in the corner there, the Pterodon Rider Regiment of Renown, so should be an interesting one. This is the, I forget the map, Devastation of Ostermark, I want to say. It does have some kind of cliffs and some terrain blockages here. You can see I'm using this cliff to secure my flank. The Lizardman player could come up and around and get behind this way, but, you know, this can kind of hold my flank here, and then it also gives me plenty of range to operate with my guns kind of in this open space here. The Lizardman player is doing exactly what he should, which is to use these cliffs to block line of sight somewhat and to block the direct line of fire artillery, to make the long way come up and around and try and, you know, mitigate as much of that missile fire as possible. Me, of course, realizing that this is the correct play, the counter play is to then move the cannon out into the open a little bit. We've also switched the organ gun's positioning slightly so that it's covering this gap right here, because of course if he does come up and around, he is going to force his army to come through this narrow gap, which is fine by me. You know, obviously fighting out in this open space does give more chances to flank around, but still, this map does have a lot of kind of choke point areas, and with these different levels, there's a lot of different strategy you can use to take advantage of the terrain here. But the Lizardman player going to start coming up and around. He's going to try and get that Ancient Salamander in range, and I have seen a lot of people, I'm not going to name any names of anyone specific, but a lot of people have been crying about the Ancient Salamander being super powerful, and don't get me wrong, it is quite powerful. 95 armor, pretty quick speed, the flammable effect makes the, you know, gives a speed debuff, but honestly, at 185, the range isn't that big, and the Ancient Salamander for a monster only has about, what, 4,500 HP, which is really not a lot for a big monster. Let's just compare to the Bastiladon. Yeah, Bastiladons have 57, Stegodons have even more than that. I want to say it's the lowest HP of any monster for the Lizardmen, so, I mean, especially with armor-piercing missile fire, which the Dwarves bring in spades, it's really not too hard to deal with. You can see I'm focusing both the organ gun and the cannon at the moment on that Ancient Salamander, and already just taking a few shots has taken significant amount of HP damage. You can see he is kind of using this terrain to block a little bit here. Since the Ancient Salamander does have a nice arc of fire, he can block that organ gun, and it does do a really good amount of damage as well. Don't get me wrong, but I just don't think, you know, I don't think they're uncounterable necessarily. Certainly they're powerful, but especially for a faction like the Dwarves, relatively easy to counter. You can see these Feral Cold Ones have used this open space to try and come up and around. I'm going to unleash some guns on them. The Thunderers, just standing in place with their long range, are going to be able to drive these Feral Cold Ones into a frenzy and frenzy them straight into these Slayers, which is, you know, exactly what I had wanted. Granted, the Slayers have their backs turned at the moment. That's not the end of the world. They'll turn around and give them the business. Meanwhile, on the front line, the Lizardman, because he advanced up and around, he is getting a little bit discombobulated here. Probably wanted to sit back and gather his forces up for a concerted push. I mean, granted, this is a pretty tight little pocket here, but you can see just these kind of piecemeal skink engagements here not going particularly well. Lots and lots of blasting charges being thrown out here. And, yeah, it's just an uncomfortable situation overall. That being said, the Ancient Salamander is doing some really good damage to these Thunderers. The Pawhawk Sentinels had taken a volley there, but are just sort of hanging around. But the gunfire is very real. As soon as this Feral Bastiladon comes into range, I'm going to focus fire with all the units of Thunderers. And, yeah, Dwarf Powder is their strength. And thankfully, most of the really good Dwarf Powder units, pretty much all of them except for maybe one Regiment of Renown, that I would say is, I might count as a powder unit, but most of their AP missiles come with the base factions. So, as I alluded to in my video yesterday, and I'll sort of be saying this throughout throughout this video. If you're a Dwarf player, I don't think that you necessarily need the DLC. Certainly there are some nice tools that you get access to, but the Dwarfs, most of the Dwarfs' primary tools come in their base toolkit, so they really don't, you know, it's not like their DLC necessarily fills a ton of holes in the roster. You can see the other Feral Bastiladon. That camera just freaked out a little bit there, but yeah, other Bastiladon, same thing. We're just going to focus fire with this giant conclave of Dwarf guns here. All these units of Thunders just opening up. You can see the Ancient Salamander trying to return fire there, but it is just not going to be enough to save this Bastiladon. It is just getting absolutely ransacked. Meanwhile, on the front line, haven't been highlighting him too much, but Ungrim got in here, absolutely wrecked the Soros Oldblood, and now, I mean, granted, he's surrounded by skinks, which is not the best, these little AP skinks, but he just wrecked that Ancient Salamander as well. The Ancient Salamander had been taking consistent shots from the cannon because it was able to get up and over that slope, and yeah, at this point, with most of the monsters shut down, you can see the balance power has shifted in my favor, and we still have this very healthy concave of guns here. Yes, there are quite a few Saurus, which will, given enough time, would probably beat these Dwarf Warriors, but that's going to take, you know, a really long time considering neither of them have particularly good attack stats and both have decent melee defense, not to mention the armor as well. But yeah, Soros Oldblood, same thing. Tries to come in the back line, and yeah, just the massive concave of Dwarf guns, just guns him down. So yeah, Thunderers are probably one of the best DPS units for Dwarves, and again, they come in the base toolkit, so yeah, organ guns, cannons, you know, slayers. You've got several really good lord choices. Ungrim is great. In this particular battle, I brought him with nothing, no abilities whatsoever. Makes him really cheap, only 1350 to bring him like that. Thorgrim, of course, really good now, especially now that they changed the High King buff to be better. He is particularly powerful support lord. You can see the organ gun crew came back from rout and is firing into the side of this unit of Saurus here. Just absolutely brutal stuff. And as the guns, because I have this kind of concave and there's these two separate engagements, they can kind of fire into the side here a little bit and route some units off. You can see a bunch of units had routed off and are now coming back. But yeah, balance power is pretty much decided at this point. Mostly just a formality. But little Skink Bro is taking some fire as well. We're going to focus fire with all the guns as soon as he comes into range as well, just to try and finish off the leadership, get this battle over with. But yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed. We'll be talking through a little bit, of course, after the battle. But yeah, definitely a fun one. I don't play the Dwarves too often, but the Dwarf gun line is definitely cinematically incredibly awesome, and thematically super awesome as well. I do love the Dwarves thematically, not necessarily my favorite playstyle in the world, but they certainly have their place, and I'm glad they're actually in a pretty decent place in the meta, all things considered. Yeah, in terms of the army breakdown there, just good kills spread all across the board here. That cannon did pick up an XP Chevron, helping to take down the Ancient Salamander, helping to take down, yeah, it took a few pot shots at the Feral Cold Ones and some other things early on in the battle, but Slayer's doing very well also. Some of them, this unit got tossed into Source in the front line, you know, kind of in that late game, but obviously the gun's doing a lot of heavy lifting as well, taking down all these monsters. And yeah, Lizardmen build, you know, I definitely see what he's going for there. I just think if he had been able to maybe gather up his forces and just push forward, or honestly just push across that open space so you can take advantage of your mobility a little bit more, might have turned out better. I don't know, it's hard to say. But in terms of just talking about the Dwarves a little bit further, so the King and the Warlord, we talked about the greenskins already and how the DLC benefits them quite a bit. As for the Dwarves, obviously you get access to the Rune Lord, which is a pretty common pick in multiplayer. He's probably one of the strongest points of the DLC. He has some really good abilities. This Anvil of Doom giving map-wide magic resistance with the Locus of Power is really nice against certain factions. Obviously having Master Rune of Wrath and Ruin can be quite good as well. Belagar, not as common of a pick, but I have seen some really fun builds using him to buff up like Hammerers, give them expert charge defense and extra melee defense. There are some fun things you can do with him, certainly, but he's not amazing. I wouldn't say he's necessarily game-breaking, but of course, you get Grombrindle, the regular Dwarf Lord, Ungrim, and Thorgrim for free. And that already gives you some pretty good toolkits, but in terms of units, Let's see here. Giant Slayers are free. The Regiments of Renown, obviously, are nice to have, certainly, like Regiments of Renown always are, but there's, I mean, Nor Grumblings, Ironbreakers, you don't really see these guys too much in the meta anymore. They do have, 90 unit models of 86 melee defense, which is absolutely insane, but Grumbling Guard are also another pretty decent one. Dragonback Slayers is probably the most common, being that the power of the Dragonback is really nice to have. That extra speed debuff especially, very, very nice for the Dwarves. Good bit of utility there. Your Missile Infantry is really where you're going to get a lot of value from the DLC. Obviously, Rangers are another nice tool. Regular Rangers are super cheap. They have Stock and Vanguard, and of course they also have shields. Decent amount of missile damage, especially for the cost. They are relatively lightly armored, especially compared to other dwarf units, but, still definitely a decent pick. Rangers with great weapons do have pretty short range, only 75 range, but they do a huge amount of armor-piercing missile damage. Their damage output is just insane if they can get into range. Likewise, of course, they do a little bit of AP in melee. They don't have shields, though. In my opinion, the best... Well, probably a little bit biased, but probably the best unit you get from the DLC is the Bugman's Rangers. These guys have so much going for them. They're immune to psychology, they have charged defense against large, they have Stock and Vanguard and shields, only 40 armor, but 38 melee defense, 24 attack, and of course, the liquid fortification gives them regeneration. So, I mean, a shielded Vanguard Stock regenerating missile unit that also has charge defense. I mean, come on, what more could you possibly want out of a missile unit? I mean, maybe AP, but let's not go there. Anyway, Bugman's Rangers, super awesome. And of course, as I said, Regiments of Renown. Skyhammer is kind of weird and not very good, but the Goblobber certainly is another nice one. But yeah, the Dwarves, as I alluded to in my last video with the greenskins, the Dwarves, like the Empire, it's certainly nice to have the extra Regiments of Renown, and if you're a Dwarf main and you can afford it, I would certainly recommend picking it up. Belagar's campaign is also really fun and unique. It's really, really challenging, probably one of the most challenging campaigns in Total War Warhammer. So if you really want a challenge, definitely spring for that. But if you don't necessarily feel the need to buy it, like I said, it doesn't give you as many tools that you're missing, I would say, if that makes sense. Like the greenskins or the vampires, like the Empire, they definitely benefit from having the extra options, but they're not critical, I wouldn't say. Like, they're not filling holes in the roster per se. But anyway, hopefully you guys enjoyed. If you do like this sort of content, be sure to like, subscribe, hit that bell notification button, so every time I upload a new video, you'll be notified. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time.